Is there conflict between science and the Christian faith? Many people in our culture today think the answer to that question is yes. But is that really the case? I'm joined today by Dr. Gavin Ortlund, a Christian scholar and a pastor, to help answer that question. Gavin, what would you say to somebody who says there's conflict between science and Christianity?
Well, I always think about Francis Schaeffer, who was a Christian apologist, and he talked about how if he had an hour with a skeptic, he would take the first majority of the time, maybe 45 minutes, and be asking questions and wanting to know where they're coming from. And then he would take the last little portion of time and share Christ with them. And I think that's helpful because everyone's coming from a different place. And, one person's area of conflict might be different than another person's. And so I want to be a good listener. And also want to show sympathy. I think it's easy for sometimes when we're doing apologetics, we make it seem so obvious as if there's no sincere struggle. I think most of us who are followers of Christ can admit we've been through times where we haven't known how to exactly bring a resolution right away. We have to kind of work through it. But what I've experienced is when there's a sense of conflict, if you press into it and you really carefully work through it, so many times it boils down to a misinterpretation, either of the science or of Christianity or of both. So for example, because I think things are so polarized in our culture, a lot of people think of science as kind of inflated up into a whole worldview, where it's not just the study of the natural order through experimentation and observation, but it's really the philosophy that there is nothing other than the natural order. And I would argue that's actually a misinterpretation of what science is supposed to do. It really is beyond the purview of any of the natural sciences to say one way or the other, is there anything beyond nature? But if that's your view of science, of course there's going to be a conflict there. I think in the other direction, a lot of people have the idea that Christianity is, it's kind of reduced down to the most literalistic interpretations of certain passages in the Bible, or just the most kind of unfair representations of Christianity in popular culture. You're watching Bill Maher interview somebody or something, and there's this sense, someone just throws out a comment about the Bible is homophobic or the Bible affirms slavery or something like that. And you think, well, is that really the most fair representation of what Christianity is? A lot of those things, if you press into it and you work carefully through it, you think, actually, that's not the only and certainly not the best representation of what the vast majority of Christians believe. And I think one of the areas where you see that is the conflict between the age of the universe in terms of what's perceived, science and faith. And people think, well, science says the universe is old. Religion in general, or sometimes just the Bible specifically, says the universe is young. And one way I've tried to kind of press into that with people is just to show how many Christians have believed in an ancient universe. And there's been no perceived conflict between science and faith. In fact, not just, say the Roman Catholic Church has made a lot of statements about these things, but a lot of conservative Protestants, you think of people like Billy Graham or Carl Henry, some of the leaders of American evangelicalism, or you think of C.S. Lewis, the great Christian writer. You think of some of the leaders in British evangelicalism, like John Stott or J.I. Packer, Henri Blocher, the French theologian, Herman Bavinck, the great Dutch Reformed theologian. You think of J. Gresham Machen, who wrote the great statement against theological liberalism. All of these Christians were happy to accept the idea that the universe is very old. It wasn't a conflict for them. And I think recognizing that helps us say, okay, it's not Christianity that teaches that the universe is old. That's one interpretation of the Bible, but it's not the only one. And it, from my vantage point, is not the best one. And so I think when you press into things and get into the details, there's actually a lot of compelling reasons to believe that there's ultimately great harmony between what Christianity teaches and what we can learn from science.